computational social science for the U.S. Navy. She was the first person to hold the position of computational social scientist in the United States government. She's taught at the University of Washington and Evergreen State College in Washington, D.C. before joining ONR, where she collaborated with scientists to address the information as it affects command and control, public affairs, and communications in new information environment. I present to you Dr. Rebecca Goolsby.
Okay, thank you. Let's get to the technical portion of this. I've been studying online behavior since the 80s, when I had a brand new baby girl at University of Washington and a Usenet account. A friend of mine calls me the world's oldest digital native, and it's true that I have a lot more in common with 23-year-olds than people my own age. But today I'm going to talk to you about the kind of research that really turns me on, which is bots. I feel myself, someone has called me queen of bots. Me and one of my colleagues discovered the first Russian botnets and sounded the alarm back in 2014, and we have been working at this hammer and tongs ever since. I have to admit, I got kind of excited when the folks at Howard said that they were going to tell me when my talk was trending, and then I found it had 4 tweets. I think that word doesn't mean what you think it means. But I did want to appreciate this because I have for my whole life been interested in historically black colleges. I actually applied for a scholarship to be one of the first white students with a scholarship at a historically black university. I didn't get it. But they are great institutions, and they have made important contributions to the security of this nation. My modest objectives here are to educate you about information conflicts, which is my special area, and to inspire scholarship among you, which you are so many inspired scholars. I mean, I am bowled over by the work that I've seen here so far, and to help empower institutions, scholars, and students to expand our understanding of online conflict. Our goal is to build community resilience, black community resilience, Hispanic community resilience, resilience against the kind of information attacks that I am about to show you what we've learned about in this projects. I'm at the Office of Naval Research. It's right here in Arlington. We've been working on this. Remember, I've been working on this personally for a long time, before I came to ONR. And in 2007, I had the opportunity to actually start working on blog research. Our blog researcher told us that we had to start studying Twitter because it was completely changing the blogosphere. And so we were ready for Arab Spring. I paired information scientists with social scientists. And that's how we got as far as we did. Kellen said earlier today, some of the problems were, the challenge that he saw was that it changes so fast and you need so many tools, and it's such a difficult problem. And yes, these are just some of the challenges that we see. Our goal is to help the U.S. Navy competently, capably, and courageously engage the challenges of the current and future information conflicts. And we've been at this for more than 10 years. Now, one of the problems that you have is you have to struggle for a new language. When I was describing what I was seeing in the information environment, I had to start making up new words and new terms. Social cyber attack, crowd manipulation, social hysteria propagation, group polarization. We had to come up with these terms in 2012 to describe what we were seeing in places like Trinidad and Tobago, in places like India. We were seeing a lot of this starts in the third world or the developing world. We had this problem of language is that when people started talking about cybersecurity, they were thinking about pipes and wires and DDoS attacks and APTs and all those sorts of other things. And so we had to start talking about cyber technical, which are those attacks in the hardware, which are a somewhat different thing from cyber social attacks. I wrote a paper trying to tell people what was coming and trying to make them understand, and published it by Woodrow Wilson Center in 2012. And I described in this paper the spectrum of crowd effects, that you had that there were positive things, where people, like crisis response and disaster relief. And then there were community things, like getting people to talk to each other better. And then there were little darker influence things where you might have propaganda. And then there was full-on social cyber attacks in which people were using any means to make people violent, unhappy, and moving them to act before they thought. We came up with this definition of social cyber attack: the use of information in cyber environments to influence people in order to manipulate their perceptions, emotions, stance, and opinions to gain a strategic advantage. All right? And specifically, social cyber attack is different from other influences in that it uses unethical, malign, and deceptive techniques to deceive, disrupt discourse, and promote harm. One of my students, Ben Nemo, who was before he was a student of mine, wrote this wonderful article in which he identifies the 4 Ds of Russian disinformation. This is really helpful because I have to teach warfighters, and they need to have snappy things to understand. And so dismiss, distort, distract, dismay became something easy, an easy way to tell them when something bad is going on. Then we were looking for all of this sort of stuff. We were looking for botnets because everybody knew botnets existed and that they were being used for commercial ends. And we were very concerned early on that these things would be used to, for example, tell Tobago that the USAID workers who were vaccinating them were trying to kill them in other ways. This was the kind of things that we were actually looking for when we started looking at this. And when I saw the Russians doing this in Euromaidan, I freaked out. I told absolutely everybody that the Russians are coming, and I looked kind of silly until the Crimean invasion. By that time, everyone had heard Rebecca Goolsby going insane, and so when NATO called up the Pentagon, they said, "Oh, you want Rebecca Goolsby." And so I became very famous in NATO because I became their advisor, and I've been working in advisory capacity for NATO ever since, helping them to understand social cyber attack. The Russians' propaganda started with things that were fun to think. It's great to be a Slav. Russian exceptionalism, wonderful, wonderful, happy campaigns. And then they would turn it around with pretty pictures of women to get more people to look at stuff, young people especially. And then they would start saying, and the Ukrainians, they don't really like you. And the way you speak Ukrainian, they make fun of you, which was true, okay? Because the Russians had made fun of how the Ukrainians spoke Russians for, decades. And so the shoe was on the other foot now. And so they were able to build these information cocktails to get people first excited about being a Slav and a Russian, and then angry at to build this imagined grievance to great levels. We began to talk about this as information maneuver, okay? The attempt to affect this audience's understanding, their memory, their perception of the event by moving them along that rabbit hole that somebody else was talking about earlier. There are information maneuvers that are online, and then there are information maneuvers that are offline, like protest is an information maneuver, a parade is an information maneuver, and we can combine them. Now, bots and cyborgs that are people who use bots to enhance their reach cheat the system, and these bot accounts shape audiences' perspective in particular ways, and we studied this for the last several years very closely. Dr. Kathleen Carley at Carnegie Mellon came up with this approach, and I owe a great deal to the research at Carnegie Mellon in order to understand what's going on. There are 3 critical concepts to understand: the echo chamber, the super spreader, and the super friend. People who communicate regularly about a topic are called cyber social communities. Remember, we had to invent words. And so Black Twitter is a cyber social community. It's often ephemeral, it moves back and forth. But when something is an echo chamber, it's persistent. And people are trading messages all the time. And they can occur naturally. But it can also create an illusion of unity of perspective. so that everybody thinks that we all feel this way. So Kathleen did some studies of the alt-right and at Twitter, and she looked at how the alt-right during the last election, or the 16 elections rather, these bots built bridges between communities of alt-right, white supremacists, and the evangelical Christians. And by having bots in the middle of these two communities to promote discussions between them, it made the evangelical Christians misidentify white supremacist rhetoric as part of their rhetoric. And it helped to bridge the gaps, and it's one of the continual problems that we see today. Super spreaders, we all kind of know, the influencers, the people with blue checks. These are the people who have exceptional abilities to spread information. They communicate frequently, they have large followings, and they often cross platforms. Now, super friends is something you've probably never heard of. But let me tell you, you're influenced by them. These are the people in your Twitter feeds or Facebook feeds that always like your posts, that always like them, and retweet them, and reply to you, and all of that jazz. These super friends become highly trusted, and when they are placed in the system, and they are doing this as a strategy, then they become arbiters of opinions and gatekeepers of conversations, and they can help to create those echo chambers. Now, as you know, in Black Twitter, the community is large and overlapping with people talking about similar topics, but it's kind of free-flowing, and there's many points of entry of new information into this kind of thing. Now, the bots, what they do is they get into these communities and they figure out who's the influencers, who are the super spreaders, and who are the super friends. And they try to manage to put bots interacting with these people in order to influence and maneuver them. So the goal is to create this echo chamber, to make sure that there are gatekeepers on the perimeters of conversation. And then they can begin to control even the bridges between the conversations and become gatekeepers of discourse. They listen to the super spreaders, and they find the super friends, and then they use these maneuvers using community, content, and algorithmic levers. These are the three levers in which this works. Now, we were studying this in 2017. We were beginning to try to figure out if you could counter what was going on. And first I had to describe it. So in 2017, I came up with this picture. The military loves pictures. And so distort, distract, dismay. Over here is the primary tactics. And you have to connect those to folk beliefs, to stories, to things that are within the structure in order to make them believable and spreadable. And then you can attack, those were given to information campaign managers who attached them to their campaign bots. And then they flooded the network, targeting influencers to fool the algorithms, okay, to make the algorithms recommend users and content to their target audiences. And their targets are their lurkers, the people within the audience who say very little or nothing about, but they're huge consumers of the information, even though they might not say something about it. Amygdala hijack. We've seen this a lot. That is when these bots, these people, flood your feed with things that make you crazy. They make you so unhappy and so crazy that you can no longer think. The amygdala is a walnut-sized organ in your brain, in the middle of your brain, that controls emotion. And it becomes overloaded with too much input, with too many chemicals hitting it too hard. You physiologically lose contact with your cerebral cortex. You cannot think clearly or at all. And then you are open to disinformation, and you're open to more social hysteria content. And you tend to go down that rabbit hole for this reason. And so one of the things they do is they try to inflame crowds so that they will, when you do that, they shut off the capacity to give you new information. And so they're not going to listen to the vaxxers, are not going to listen to the government, whatever it is, that they're all so caught up in this feeling festival, this vibing that they're doing, that they can no longer even accept information, even from their dear friends. Now, all is not lost. There are vulnerabilities to social cyber attack. The first problem is burnout. okay? So remember the head cutting videos that Daesh did? Those burned out pretty quickly, all right? Nobody wanted them, everyone rejected them because it was just too much. A short spike and then it was gone. Now, if you can expose what's going on in the early stages of infections, then the subjects who can help each other a little bit, saying, no, that's too much. You're going too far overboard. Or come back. If you can do that early in an information campaign, people can be shamed for falling for obvious fraud. So when people use Snopes and other disinformation exposure networks, they can really help. Vigilance. If a community knows that it's being targeted, African American community is now very aware that they're being targeted by the Russians. The Hispanic community is now being subjected to the same sorts of Russian influence attacks. I had some students in Yale who figured this out in the last election. Just students, undergraduates, okay? If a community is vigilant, then you can educate each other as to what to look for and how to spot these parasites to avoid infection. And engagement of critical thinking skills, okay? So if you can get people to think, and that means you have to create a safe space for them. Why do you think that such and such is going on? Why? Tell me more. Because tell me more can sometimes create the safe space, and people go down that rabbit hole and realize as they try to answer your legitimate questions, they have to reach their cerebral cortex in order to get the ego gratification. And so if you can slowly move people out of this space, but they have to trust you, it has to be a safe space, and you have to kind of know what to say. Further, some people, you can't reach them, they're too locked in. But there's a book called Talk Into Crazy that I make all my students read. It's from Mark Goolsby, and it's really about face-to-face, talking how to talk people down who have gone a little bit over the edge face-to-face. If you have teenagers and older parents, let me tell you, it really can save lives, that book. Carly came up with this study. We did this research to figure out how to get people out of it, and she created something called the BEND approach. Basically, I said, we have BEND's 4 Ds. Could there be some other things to counter that? And Kathleen, brilliantly, went further than that. She looked at community network measures. So she did this social network analysis, and she showed what the Russians are doing and other adversaries is they are manipulating those community levers, building new communities, and then unleashing them on a target community, backing particular actors and making them seem more important, boosting the followerships of certain actors so that their voice gets amplified naturally by the algorithms, bridging to communities. You can make people, remember Leslie Jones, who was attacked constantly on Twitter? That was an attempt to nuke her, to make her leave the platform and not come back, okay? You can get people to say, don't listen to that guy, he's full of it. That's kind of neutralizing that person in the community. You can make people neglect certain situations by using different kinds of techniques this way, and you can narrow the community and cut off different courses, people in the groups of the community to create that echo chamber. So these are these are kind of like primary things that I can teach warfighters about. Okay? So, researching, where do we begin? Okay, so I'm working on how to understand individual bots and what they're doing right now. This is what I'm doing. I get a bunch of tools, and there are tools out there that are free. This one isn't, but this one is as tools go, fairly cheap. And you can get Tweet Tracker at Arizona State University is free, and you guys can have access to that. To look at different kinds of social media, and this is what I do with it. I use this particular tool called Scrawl to look at things. And I was looking here. I'm working with NATO on a research technology group, and we all decided that we would study manipulations of Canadian elections together. So this is the work that I'm doing here. This is early on. Canadian elections are October 21st, and so this was early on. The top volume was 100 tweets a minute. This is very easy. But I saw that early on, as early as June, most of the discussions in the top 10, the people who were putting out the most stuff, were actually bots. When you have more than 100,000 tweets in your repertoire, you are not a human being. I am sorry. And you can see that there are some real non-humans here. I like the one, this one here. She has 293,000 likes and only 20,000 tweets. Oh, that's because she's deleted most of her tweets, so that you can tell, she might not be able to tell what she was before, okay? So I looked early on and saw that some of these bot suspects were including that one with the 200,000 likes, were already in the influencers according to this algorithm, and that there was the tweets were fairly partisan with some kinds of polarization. And I looked at something called Louvain community detection, which is a common algorithm that you guys can use. This is, I think, Elastic. This was part of this thing. And so I was noticing from my early work that average community size was high. Of course, I normally do NATO discourses where average community size is 20. This one, they're 161. Now they're averaging at about 200 and 300. Elections are coming. And I was looking at some of these. Gord Bolton is a well-known Russian actor. And I mean, among my crowd, we know who that guy is. And he was, at 6/14 July, he was pushing Trudeau must go. And that was when I went, interesting. Trudeau must go pops up in the 16th through 14th, and I began to look at it. Look at this, okay? So I looked at this community for Trudeau must go, and I did some cleaning of the data. And I discovered after I cleaned some of the data that there is this one big bot, Paola, and she was connected to all of these bots, and each of these bots were retweeting things like 4 times. It's Tim A is easily a cyborg, and it's an influencer, and that's simple. And so I began to look at these key actors. As was when I began to see that, yes, as early when this thing started out, Trudeau must go, could be Russian, we don't know yet, but, and definitely had bot behaviors. Both conservatives and liberals are using bots, okay, to manipulate the conversations. Conservative bots are more evidence, and there are more of them, and their behavior is more sophisticated. And it's possible that deepfake activity is also taking place. What do I mean by deepfakes? Well, they're using automated plain text to talk about Trudeau. And here's the tell. The English is too good. I know they're Canadians, but they can't never make a mistake. And I've seen this over and over, and lots and lots of tweets with absolutely no mistakes. You know, how you flip a couple of letters, or you add an extra period. These are perfect, and they make me, and the things they're saying are kind of bland, and they made me think, maybe. Now, really, it's very, very hard to tell if something's a bot or not. Botometer, which a lot of people think is the gold standard, has about a 50% success rate, okay? So a lot of people act like bots, and that's the problem. So what I did was I would take a bot suspect, and I would just look at it, okay? I have the tools tonight if you guys want to know what tools there are. And this tool is really super simple. And to look at, so this one tweets 20 tweets, and then goes dead. And then it tweets 15 tweets, and then it goes tweets for a while. And it's very careful to stay quiet at Canadian nappy times. Now, this there is a particular person called Dr. Jacob Schrad. And Dr. Jacob Schrad is a troll. He's a human being, and he tweets about, 15, 20 times a day. But he has a crowd of retweeters that rivals Beyonce, okay? I mean, he is retweeted all the freaking time. There's this huge, huge crowd of bots that are retweeting just about everything he says. And you can see here that this particular bot, the second one from the down, was also retweeting itself. Okay, so it did Jacob's Rad 29 times and itself 19 times, and that's definitely a bot behavior. Okay, and here's the Jacob's Rad's trolling tweets. It likes it most of all. Then I did another key actor sample, a different one of these bots. And it posted 819 times now. Remember before it was like 40? This is like 2 weeks ago. And now they're doing it about 800 times with a very pattern of retweeting. It would retweet the same thing at the next day. So it would have a pattern of, because it was running out of material, so it just waits till the next day to tweet something else again. And there seemed to be daily batches of retweets, and that was how he was keeping up his and he used the same URL, but from different sources. So he retweeted the same story from multiple different sources, so that it made it seem it. So this kind of amplification. This may be an authentic activity, but it appears to be this backing maneuver. And you can just add hashtags to things and make things see trend, the hashtags trends. And this is another one. It shows irregular periods of the same period of time. It retweets itself 7 times over 2 days. And this meme is retweeted. I'm just showing you, just like I said, this is just examples of things that I look. Here is a liberal bot, 385,000 tweets from this very old account, and puts this account in the category of a likely bot. Now, one of the things that we were doing this in 2014, I was studying all of these accounts, and the Russians were definitely doing A/B testing in 2009. I found a whole bunch of Russian facing Sputnik, RTCOM sort of things, and the name was blah, 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 A, and blah, 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 B. Yes. And they also, yeah, right. I mean, you can't get, and so the fact that, so when you see really old accounts now, they actually make me more suspicious, but then again, maybe I'm superstitious. Okay, here's the liberal account. It's doing a lot, okay? It sleeps. Now here, September 14th and 15th, okay, this is crazy time. Canadian elections, lots of fun, all right? We're talking about 6,000 tweets a minute sometimes. This is almost all bot actors, just about all, okay? And, the top 2 are communities. The first one is liberal, and the second one is the Trudeau Must Go crowd, okay? And look at the size of the crowds, they're very, very similar. And this is the mostly liberal campaign. Remember the dots that you saw before? Okay, so the size of the dot means the number of interactions. So the number of times people are retweeting them or talking to them or engaging those people. And so this is what we call an excite campaign, okay? And down here are anti-Scheer, there's the Trudeau and Scheer, the 2 major candidates, and there's another one from the NDP, Jamit Singh. So you have all of these anti-Trudeau tags down here. The pro ones, the happy ones, Choose Forward, Team Trudeau at the top. Over here are just the candidates themselves and just random hashtags that have to do with who they're targeting. They're targeting this bunch. And over here are the election hashtags, okay? Now, this is the Choose Forward has 16, is the big one here. There are 9 dismay hashtags. This is the second most active, Sheer Lies. Okay, this is the statistics that we can get on this. Sheer Disaster is, getting a whole lot of interactions in this thing. Anti-campaigns, dismay campaigns, they work. Now this is the Trudeau Must Grow group. Now, so you have the Trudeau Must Grow thing down here, and all of these are anti-Trudeau hashtags. All of these, all the way up to there. And up here, and notice there are no election hashtags, no mentions of those. They don't interact enough to even make the cut. And up here are the 4 positive, Sheer for PM, that sort of thing up there at the top. And now look over here. There's Dr. Jacobs Rad. This is an influencer and an influencer. I'm not sure what the heck this is. This is definitely a bot. And most all of these are those bots. And look how big the dots are, okay? So this is showing you that while the liberals are using bots, they're being much more effective, okay? Because they have lots more smaller dots, okay? A lot more people with smaller interactions. whereas this is kind of a bot-infested mess. And so the question is, will it be, how effective is it? We're not sure. We'll know October 21st. Okay, here are so you notice that the top interactions are with Justin Trudeau because they're targeting him and saying, don't like him. Jacob's Rad, that's their big guy. We Are Canadian Proud, Liberal Party, Son Lori Lawson, and these influencers. Now what we're trying to do here is create for our forces and for our community activists, okay, operational mastery of the information environment. You're not going to be able to control this stuff, but I want the people, especially activists, to understand the information environment and to be able to have the knowledge of choosing courses of action, what to do about it. That's really the important thing. And the ability to make those decisions and to effectively act to achieve the strategic effects you want to, even in situations of conflict and competition like this. The goal is conceptualized social trust. That is, when you are talking about your story, you are the authority of your world. And that is the goal that we're seeking to put together. Now, here's some of the fun part. This is Twitter stories and how they are told. What should you be looking at? There's lots of stuff to look at, okay? We need more research on cross-platforms because social media stories are told on many different platforms, YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and WhatsApp, okay? What is the relationship between online and offline flow of these stories, and what about behavior? Message receivers put messages together in different ways. The fellow from Pizzagate was, we think, crazy, but he didn't say he was crazy in his trial, and his lawyer and the prosecution didn't say he was crazy. Most people got in their feeds in that community. You know, Hillary Clinton is married to Bill Clinton. People said, yeah, that's true. Bill Clinton is a perv. Well, that's kind of a matter of opinion, okay? Anthony Weiner is a perv. Well, less of a matter of opinion. Hillary is connected to two pervs, therefore she's a perv. And that trains into Hillary's a pedophile, and she runs a pedophile ring. Most people are tuning out of that story, okay? And QAnon and other kinds of groups like that are feeding, just trying to find the jamoke, trying to find the person who believes the Nigerian email letter. You know, those email scams were written poorly because if an intelligent person saw all the spelling mistakes and errors in it, they would pay no attention to it and it would pass by. It would only attract people who had low information in their lives, who might not be very bright or very educated, and tried to hook those people because it didn't want to get educated people involved because they would see right through this quickly. And so we have to deal with that problem of perspective. Now, can we do some research on this, people? Yeah. The problem of how people perceive and interpret online stories is a crucial one. I usually have to teach people that Twitter weighs your algorithms. Another big research problem is how do you prevent malactors from gaming the system? That's the research problem. How can social psychologists measure audience impact so that we know what's going on in Canadian elections, whether or not that's impactful? Are all those big dots an indication that it's not doing well? I'm hoping so. Let me see. There aren't many studies on how culture matters in social media storytelling, disinformation, group polarization, or any other of these others. There's not a lot of cultural studies. Digital ethnography needs new methods for studying online influence and offline behavior. That's why I'm so impressed with Colin Bubb's piece today. How would psychologists, scholars of theater or poetry or rap approach the study of rumor, group polarization, and crowd manipulations? We already have Tyree here doing some really important work on that. I was glad to see it. How can we calm people down? How can we get our friends to think? How can we help pull ourselves out of a big hijack? Let me tell you, the day after Trump was elected, my Facebook feed full of academics and nice people went batshit. The stories that I had to pull people away from the screens and say, the FBI does not investigate elections based on the numbers of phone calls that you give them, okay? Think how that works. You're a Senate worker. So this, how can you know that yourselves? The way I pulled myself out of amygdala hijack, I took all of those people and I put them in a special Facebook room, and we began to calm them down. I said, this is your screaming room. Say anything that you want to, but just don't say it in your own feed, because you'll hate yourself later. And so, I basically had a group therapy session for about 3 months getting people to calm the hell down, all right? We may need more interactions like that in the coming weeks. This is my life, people. What do we need to be doing to save our communities? That's the research that needs to be done here. And that's why I'm coming here to inspire and empower you. This is the stuff that needs to be done. We'll help you any way we can. Now, how do we do this? The way I did this was I put together information scientists, computer scientists, the arts and the humanities for content, and journalism also needs to be all in there. The study of cyber influence requires diversity, okay, and partnership. It has to, because let me tell you, your own little bubble and window is the biggest blinders you've got. And being able to see other people and talk to other people about their communities and what the communities are thinking and saying, and reaching that respectfulness. The hardest thing that I have had is that I'm from rural Texas, okay? My entire family, lifelong Democrats. My grandfather was an UAW union organizer, okay? So I'm like Democrat to the bone, right? The entire family goes full Trump. This is amazing to me. Can you help me save them? We have to have, so trying to reach these people respectfully and caringly. My own father-in-law went full Trump, and I was just like, let me tell you, talking to crazy saved my life in terms of figuring out how to talk to people to help them walk out of the places that they are in. Now, ONR has programs for historically black colleges, and you can find information here, and we'll get this sent out to all of you. There's also something called DEP Score, okay, the Defense Established Program to Stimulate Competitive Research. And so if you're in certain states, and historically black colleges and universities tend to be in those states, this includes DC, there are these programs designed to do this. Now, just because programs exist don't mean nothing, okay? I have, in my lifetime, mentored a number of African American students, and we found scholarships that existed but nobody could actually get for various means and sundries. So I think that it's going to take a community to help people to get the kinds of work that they together that they need. But I think that this is doable. It's a doable thing. That's why I'm talking to Ingrid and trying to help them to find the way forward. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for your time. Okay.
So we have time for a few questions before our next session. Anybody have questions for Dr. Goolsby, Dr. Garley?
Mm-hmm.
And,
It's not a question, it's a statement. And I just want you to know how much I enjoy and appreciate your being a member of the military research team and able to share this amount of work with us. Because it's really good to see what our tax money is doing. But also, I respect the fact that there's a layer of your work that's below, that's top secret, that you can't share. So I just, again, thank you very much for what you do for us and also for sharing what you can.
Oh, yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation. Let's have a quick question. I don't know, you didn't mention it, but what responsibility, if any, do the social media platforms have? And just kind of giving 2 recent stories about that young kid that drove Revenue to South Carolina 200 miles to meet someone he met on Snapchat. And they were trying to triangulate who this person was because the file disappeared. They
Mhm.
didn't get any help.
Oh, yeah.
Companies had any kind of
Yeah, don't get me started. Yeah. I think that we definitely need more research. Okay, we need better regulations. And the problem is that the regulations, the regulators don't know anything, okay? They're stupid as a stump about this stuff. We need researchers who can work on the algorithms and work on things like how do you make algorithms transparent, okay? My personal feeling, we need to have a board of visitors, okay, to work to work on the development. Well, I want to see us regulate the platforms, but to do that we need more research, because the reason the platforms are stupid is because they have let out the beast. They can't do. They won't do stuff, and they can't do stuff because we don't have the research. But at the same time, they're limiting your ability to get to the data that you need in order to do the kind of research that you've got to do. So that's what we need, is to have the Congress and other people first facilitate much greater openness and cheapness of the data so that it can get out to you so that you can do the research, okay, ethically and effectively so that we can do the kind of regulations that we need to do. There's one more.
I'm more concerned about the effect on my brain.
Mm-hmm.
How disinformation will make me less reasonable.
Yes.
How do I fight that?
How do you fight that? I tell people to walk away from the screen on a regular basis. Go out with your dog or your cat and get away from it and re-engage your critical thinking skills. Read actual newspapers. I now subscribe to 5, okay, to help. Even Wall Street Journal, even things that that are a little bit to the right and to the left, but not too far either way, to make sure that my critical reasoning things are honed up. And walking away from the screen for periods of time is the best way to do this. The Talking to Crazy book helped me also to kind of like talk to myself and say, now, is this really going on? Is this real? Are we really going to have a civil war? I mean, what are the, how, so being able to talk to yourself and talking to friends, face-to-face stuff. The real way that we're going to work with this is have our communities come together face-to-face to talk about this stuff so we can talk each other down. That's what I have to say.
I just want to make a quick comment. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and starting this summer, they started calling each other, and their whole entire little group of friends call each other bots as a disrespectful term.
Yeah.
And so they don't call each other names. They call each other, oh, you're just such a bot. You're a bot. And I had to finally say, okay, don't call him that. And it's so silly, but I knew.
Well, it's better than other things.
Yeah. The intent behind it, so it has become a slang term. Bot
Yeah.
has become a slang term.
There was I didn't even show the Canadian, all of the bots started calling themselves not a bot and hashtag not a bot. It was like thank you for labeling yourselves. It really didn't help.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions, and then we'll ask, have a couple of other questions.
Okay.
So, we're in this period where people are talking about breaking up the platform, but I find that our elected officials don't know enough about the platforms to say how or what it is that they want to break up.
Mhm.
And is there anybody that you see out there that actually knows what's going on?
There's a new book by one of the Microsoft people that's coming out in the next few days that says they're going to have some ideas about that, from Microsoft. And I'm interested in that since they had to deal with this situation themselves earlier on. So I think that that's another area, like I said, if we have more research, but we also need to convene, this is what I meant by board of visitors. We needed to have a group of serious intellectuals and people from the business community, people from the social media community, and so on, who can begin to address this. I don't think breaking it up is the answer, okay? Because, if you broke up a cancer and it metastasizes all over the body, you actually have a new problem, okay? I'd actually like to see the things stay where they are so that we can at least keep a better eye on them, okay? Because trying to monitor WhatsApp and Reddit, that's a whole nother, bag of fish there. So I don't think that there is any one good solution, except we don't need more research and more discussion as a nation as about what to do about this.
And my other question is, we teach a digital media literacy class to our students, and we focus on news literacy and media literacy, but I'm also wondering about the social media impact on other parts of society, not just news and media.
Yeah, because most of the things that you're seeing that's going around are, this kind of, the alt-white community is crazy. I mean, those people are really sick. They're really, really sick. And I don't know how to fix them, right? They're ill. So when you're looking at this, so what's being passed around them isn't news. It's ideas. It's like the Ukrainians who were told, it's great to be a Slav. And those Ukrainians who were great to be a Slav ended up killing their neighbors, okay? Southwest Ukraine is like Nazi Germany with all this horrible stuff. And you know something? Our soldiers have the number one problem is suicide. And that's when they are taught to kill with all of the psychological training and support and all those services, and it devastates them. Think about what those people in southeastern Ukraine are killing their neighbors, what it's doing to their society, their psyches, their mentality. This is horrible, horrible stuff. And so, so we've got to figure out, I know it's awful, but how are we going to save the people we can and our own societies as well? Yeah.
I didn't quite lovely presentation, but I didn't quite get your scenario description and situation relatively.
Yeah. Well, no, that was just okay. In the 80s, a lot of us got emails that was said to be from the Nigerian prince. And the Nigerian prince had these monies that he needed to put into an American bank account in order to save it. And so he would get these. We got these strange emails that said, please help me, and if you replied to him, he would ask you for your bank account information, and then he would transfer money out of your bank. They wanted to make sure this Nigerian prince scam went everywhere. In about 1985, it was one of the very first things I studied. And it was just crazy. I got it at University of Washington. I hit almost everybody at University of Washington. I don't even know how he got all those emails. So there's kind of a standard story among researchers, that it's like the Nigerian prince scam, and to describe that. It had nothing to do with Nigeria, in fact. Okay. Yeah.
You've been talking about this, like with the Nigerian root scam, and everything you talked about is kind of this idea of trying to take people and divide them in a sense, right? Like you said, the alt-right, attacking the alt-right, basically the liberal side and the conservative side in Canada, and you've also talked about like how do we educate people and help them, and how academics get involved. But I guess my question is, it doesn't seem advantageous to a lot of groups to stop this from happening, including within the United States.
Oh, yeah.
And so, even though this business, synopsis of the government, obviously yourself,
Yeah.
and I'm sure many, many others, and as we mentioned, there's a lot that you can't divulge to us. But I guess my kind of question, my concern is, where does the motivation come from to really attack this problem? Because it seems like there needs to be buy-in from all angles of society.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. So, one of the things that I have to spend most of my life doing is inspiring hope. Okay, so in all of these places that we see, the antidote is a lot of face-to-face, people talking to each other. I think that and when people can lift themselves out of the social media bubble, and can come together. I mean, this is all about diplomacy. I'm actually, one of my things now is cyber diplomacy. How do we get people to talk to each other? But I don't think it's as hopeless as other people think. But I take regular breaks from social media and actually talk to students face on face. I go to countries all over the world and I talk to people about social media in Hungary, in Poland, in Singapore, okay, in India, okay? And I think that there is a lot more hope out there. People are, I think, basically good. Now, how we can stop the madness, it's all of the incentives, that's something that we need to work on in algorithms. We need to work to break the algorithms that oppress. We need to work to make there be more transparency in algorithms, and we need to possibly criminalize a lot of this stuff. I mean, there were 12 Russians who were doing some of this stuff, who are no longer in this country, and they are facing espionage charges. And that would be an interesting precedent to set. I keep thinking that if some of these American purveyors of Russian bots were subject to some kind of penalty, civil or criminal, that also, you know, so people can learn.
But can we find them?
You know, okay, you'd be surprised. Yes, you can. Not everybody, and not even most of them, but all you have to do is catch a few of them to scare the heck out of everybody else. You know, so it doesn't have to be everybody, but you can make it a much less bad experience, good experience. Yeah.
We have time for one or two more questions.
I just wondered whether you could describe for me the communication cycle with both bots. For instance, how does it start and end when someone on the other side of the screen realizes that they are interacting with a bot? Because for me, that's one way that should be able to discuss that.
Yeah, that's very difficult to say. Since we started looking at them in 2013, that's really when they arise. Okay, and it evolves very rapidly. And a lot of the bots that you're seeing, you saw the 2009 account. Have been these accounts have been around for a long time, and they've been experimenting on how to engage for years and years. So trying to describe that is very difficult. How do you turn it off is harder. Yeah.
If a bot sends out a tweet, for instance,
Yeah.
And someone responds to the tweet,
Yeah.
and you don't get anything back from the bot, does that communication still go on?
Often these bots, what's interesting about those, particularly Canadian bots you just saw, is that, they get them all out and there's absolutely no interaction to those things, or very, very little, okay? But remember, they're looking at lurkers, okay? And so if they can just expose people who don't, to the idea that what they're hoping for is that in the 5th, 6th, 7th time you see anti-Trudeau stuff, that you're going to eventually believe, it's going to erode your memory. So there's a lot of factors in play. That's why we need all kinds of social science. We need a full court press. If I were going to do Obama's brain thing again, had that 10-year brain study, I'd work on these aspects. Yeah. Okay.
One more question.
Yeah.
Just a comment
Yeah.
and a question. So one of the things that I felt was not raised, not necessarily in your presentation, but that goes to the issue of digital media literacy, right? Do people understand the nature of the messages or the nature of the interactions that they're having with those online spaces, right? Are you sharing information intentionally, unintentionally? Do you know the consequences, right, of sharing that information and the impact it can have on persons who are receiving that information? And so I think that is also a very interesting area for social science research, is to understand whether or not people understand a lot of the dynamics with respect to digital media literacy in a way that we do, right? We understand the language, but my retired grandmother who's using WhatsApp and Keynote does not understand that, right? But my second question has to do, so recently there was a medical Navy ship, the USS Comfort. They go around the Caribbean and they provide free medical services, not vaccinations. They provide free primary health care.
Yes. They do vaccinate cows.
To underserved populations in the Caribbean. And I noticed that there was an influence campaign. I'm not too sure who sort of started that campaign, ridiculous, and, and then they brought up this TV experiment, all valid, given
Yeah.
the historical context of the United States and the relationship with African Americans.
Yes.
But in the Caribbean, like, we don't have that context in the same way. So that actually influenced a lot of people did not go on the ship.
Wow.
For example, when the ship got to Grenada,
Wow.
because they saw that video on YouTube, and they saw a lot of the posts on social media.
Uh-huh.
And my question to you is, how do we think about, like, influence campaigns within the context of, like, health communication?
Okay, that's an enormous topic. One of my, David Brentowski over at George Washington University is one of the top people in that field. I look at, remember, I looked at anti-vaxxers when I was a brand new mother. That's really where I got involved in all of this, was looking at the anti-vaxxer campaigns. There I was a new mommy in graduate school, away from home, and all this anti-vaxxer stuff was going through Usenet, all parents. And, and healthcare is a big issue on this. There's a whole lot of medical miscommunication. That's really a hard one to look at. But I think that the beauty of the method that we're looking at here, with the Ben method of approaching this, it's content-free. You can begin to see what's happening, no matter what the content is, and to figure out how that is happening. That's what we built it for. That's why I'm out here saying, use it. We have papers on this to help you to extend the framework and to use it to help guide your research. We think that it's, after all of this, the many years of research, we feel like it is a solid framework that will help you. Okay? All right.
Oh, one last question. That's our very last question.
It's just really, really fascinating.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of what you've looked at is in social networks, but what about search engine optimization and Google search algorithms? Because if I search for something, you're talking about health, I search for something hot, vaccines or whatever, and then it comes up, and
Right.
I tend to trust the things at the top of the search results. I
We-
know that's probably harder.
Okay, don't get me mad. We don't have nothing, okay? My budget is actually quite tiny. And National Science Foundation got nothing. They need to do some research on SEO, okay? And to help people to empower themselves against SEO. One of the young women that I know is working on Black Google, which I think is a brilliant idea, but she's going to have other kinds of problems in terms of creating a search engine for African American communities. I think creating alternate SEOs might be some ways to go, but we've got to figure that one out, and that's why we need research and information sciences plus social sciences. Can you imagine doing something like that as an SEO project? That I think that has legs. We just need to get the government to understand, and this is the problem. I'm one of the very few people who has a full understanding of all of this stuff, and so I kind of have to work on everything. And we don't have enough people, even at national academies and academies of sciences, who are good with this. It's all part of an AI problem that people aren't willing to look at because it's messy, and it's not going to provide them with a bright, shiny object, and it's not going to have any good answers in the short term. This is a hard one, and that's why I think it should be a national priority. Let you go. Thank you so much.
Well, that was wonderful, and we really thank you for that presentation. Now we're going to hear from, let's see, we have, it looks like our Google person isn't here yet. So what we're going to do is that we're going to keep moving ahead so that we can catch up time, and maybe we can have that presentation later. So we have Dr. Carolyn Byerly. We have Beatrice Ebwini. Beatrice is here? Yes. And is Kamal here? Okay, so first we're going to hear from Dr. Byerly, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Ebwini. Doctor? Oh, yes, okay. You'll go next.